And this
Start recording. Okay, let me welcome everyone to this pre-town meeting and thank Dan Silverman, our town moderator, for offering to moderate these sessions. We will go through the articles typically one at a time with people being able to ask questions. To ask a question, you need to raise your hand. You get to that by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, and then the raise hand is there. I've just done that. Alternately, wave your arms frequently, and we'll try to, and we hope we will see you. There's more than one screen's worth, so it's a little bit hard to know. The raise hand is better because that does pop you to the top of the list. And with that, Dan, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Dick. And thank you as always to the forum for sponsoring this pre-town meeting. Just a couple of things in terms of how we're going to go through this. First off, as Dick said, we will go through the warrant one by article. I always view this pre-town meeting as the opportunity for people to ask questions about the articles, and it kind of gives administration, the Board of Selectmen, Select Board, I'm sorry, and town administration, and those other people who may be proponents of various articles, an opportunity to get a sense of what kind of questions are going to be asked at town meeting and where the debate may go. This is not intended to be a forum for debate. We have ample time to do that at town meeting. If we start to get into debating the articles tonight, it'll be a much longer session than I think anybody is interested in. So this is an opportunity to preview what some of the questions will be. If someone is asked a question and is able to answer it tonight, that's great. If they're not able to answer a question that's asked, this gives them a good opportunity to come to town meeting prepared to answer that question. I'm not going to allow any really strong advocacy one way or another. Again, a brief commentary on what the substance of the article is, but I'd like to try to stay away from advocacy either for or against any of the articles. Again, town meeting is really the proper forum for that, not this pre-town meeting. So that I'm gonna come down a little hard if people start to wander too far into the realm of advocacy or debate. The other thing I did want to mention, because I think there may have been some questions about it. Those of you who got your warrants in the mail, and I know I was one of them, who turned to the back and saw that the signatures of the select board and the constables didn't make it into the copies of the warrant that were mailed. I want to assure everyone that the legal requirement for for posting signed copies of the warrant was met. The select board did sign the copies. I think it was on August 9th, though I can double check on that date. And the constables did post the warrant as required by our charter and by state law in a timely fashion. And the constables also then signed the return of the warrant, attesting to the fact that they had posted the warrant. So if there was any question about whether or not this warrant was legally issued, it was in fact. So with that,
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure thing, Dick. Go ahead.
After we go through the pre-town meeting, we will then have a presentation on Maurice's campground from the committee that's studying that. And that will be longer format. And also after that, I think Article 16, the presenters of Article 16, or Christine anyway, wants to do a presentation on the bottle bill, a very brief one. So that will follow the normal pre-town meeting part. But with that, let's go back to pre-town meeting, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dick. Thank you for reminding me on that. It slipped my mind. So the Article 1 is to pay prior year invoices. These are normally invoices, which for one reason or another didn't make it to town before the fiscal year is closed. There are, because it's a prior year's invoice, there are some special requirements at an annual town meeting. Paying a prior year's invoice requires a 4/5 vote. At a special town meeting, it requires a 9/10 vote. So that's why you see that higher quantum of vote in your warrant there. Let me just introduce our town administrator, Rich Waldo. Rich, is there anything you want to say about these? I think it's kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah, I think you pretty nailed it pretty well, which is, sometimes we receive invoices for services rendered in a fiscal year that we don't receive them until the next fiscal year. As much as we try working with our vendors to get these bills in time, they do appear to be late every once in a while. And Mass General Law doesn't allow us to pay out of the current fiscal year's appropriation to pay for prior year service without authorization at town meeting. And that's pretty much the gist behind this article.
Well, thank you, Rich. And just as a procedural note, because this requires a 9/10 vote, the procedure that we are allowed to use for 2/3 vote, where if it's clearly a 2/3 majority, the moderator can make that determination based on a show of hands, voter cards rather, or of a voice vote. In this case, it'll be voter cards being held up. That procedure is not available for the supermajorities of a 4/5 or a 9/10 vote. So just as a heads up, and I will let the town meeting know, if it's not a unanimous vote, I will have to count this vote. Just so people are aware of that. Any questions about this? Article 2 is to fund some of the capital budget items that were deferred from the annual town meeting back in June. Rich, would you like to speak to this briefly?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, thank you. So this article here is our capital budget proposed. You'll see that the article is put together by funding source. The two different funding sources, actually, I should say the three different funding sources is free cash, ambulance receipt, and beach fund. The printing of the warrant needs to be done a month in advance. And about a month ago, if you asked me if I thought we were going to get free cash certified, I would have probably have told you there's a slimmer of hope. There's a chance. Now that we're about 4 days out, 3 days out from town meeting, free cash will not be certified. I was hoping at this point to be able to deliver the good news that we've gone through the financial books. We're going to have free cash certified, but we're not there, but we're extremely close. To give you a little background, just because I know that this has been a priority of the town for quite a while, the current status of where we are with the financials is there's 3 financial years that need to be audited. There's fiscal year 20, 21, and then our most recent year, fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 20 was the problematic year. That's where most of the errors had occurred. And the financial team had been working, a year and a half trying to unwind and correct all the misaccounting that had occurred over that year and a half. And all of those corrections that were discovered for fiscal year 20 have been presented to the auditors, and the auditors actually have it in hand right now. And they're going through all those corrections, all those errors that were picked up, detected. They're looking at the background behind it, and they're going through it. I did hear from the auditors today that it looks really good in terms of what they're finding. It's matching up very well. They did have some questions on some of the funds that may come up, but they're actually ready for the fiscal 2021 financials. So we're in a position where the fiscal year 20 has been addressed with the auditors. They're ready to proceed with fiscal year 21. And the reason why they can't proceed with 21 until 20 is because they need starting balances. And they can't get the starting balances until the prior fiscal year is wrapped up. They're in a position comfortable enough to carry over those financial records into fiscal year 21, perform the audit. And once those 2 fiscal years are done, we're able to take the most recent fiscal year 22, send it off to DOR. And at that case, we would get our free cash certified. But a month ago, I met with the OR, that we talked about the process. They said, once you start getting into late August, early September, that's when we enter into our tax rate setting season. And setting the tax rate takes precedence over certifying free cash. So they basically said point blank to me, it's going to be difficult for us to certify it by September 10th, but we'll try. But the reality is they're not going to get the information from the auditors in time for town meeting. I do expect that our free cash will be certified probably sometime in the beginning of October. I mean, let's give the auditors a little chance for 21. We'll give them the financials for 2022, go to the DOR, and we expect DOR to take maybe 10 to 14 days to be able to certify free cash. So unfortunately, we're not going to have it for town meeting. And so you're going to see amendment on article number 2, which is going to indefinitely postpone the capital budget that is funded from free cash. And you'll only be voting on ones that are funded from available funds, which is through the ambulance receipt and the beach fund.
Okay, thank you, Rich. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Mr. Simon, could you mute yourself? Toby Simon? You need to, Mr. Simon, you need to unmute yourself.
Did I
It's
do it?
in the lower
There you go.
right.
Yeah, you got it. Go
I
ahead.
have just a general question. I don't understand what ambulance receipts was all about. Could you just give me a quick summary of how many ambulance runs are actually reimbursed for? And does insurance cover the cost for all these services, or are people billed for them?
Do you want me to try to handle?
How do you
that one,
generate
Rich,
this
or-
money?
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Well, given that in my prior lifetime, I was the fire chief and was involved with the ambulance receipts, I can do my best to answer Mr. Simon's question. When we being the Wellfleet Fire Department, take someone to a hospital by ambulance, they are billed for that. If insurance covers that, the town gets reimbursement to insurance. For individuals who do not have insurance coverage, the town, I know, works with people to make sure that does not become a hardship for their financials to pay for that ambulance run. But the ambulance receipts is a significant source of revenue to the town through the fire department. And it's then used to cover some of the operational costs of the fire department going forward. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think everybody is billed.
Yeah, everyone is billed, and you know, that's
Okay.
without regard to insurance or not.
And what proportion of the collections are from insurance?
The majority of them, I can't give you a percentage off the
Okay.
top of my head. I'm far enough away from it. 9 years ago, I could have answered that, but I can't.
Is there a report to the selectmen every year on this fund?
Yes, that would be part of the report based on the fire department's finances.
Oh.
It's part of the town's accounting. I might
Okay,
suggest,
thank you.
if you'd like more detail on that, get a hold of Chief Pauly and he can probably give you
Okay,
specifics on that. Thank you for your question.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure thing. Any other questions? So Article 3 proposes a transfer to the stabilization fund. I can perhaps save a little bit of time here. Again, this was intended to be funded from free cash. When we had our annual town meeting in the spring, there were, I'm sorry, the prior fiscal year's town meeting, a year and a half or so. It was necessary to fund the budget by taking a significant amount of money, $639,000 from the stabilization fund to help balance the budget for fiscal 22, which is the fiscal year that we're in the midst of now. So in order to replenish that fund, the intent was, once free cash was certified, to transfer from free cash back into the stabilization fund. That was intended to happen at this town meeting, but as Mr. Waldo just explained, given that free cash is not going to be certified this motion will be, this article will be indefinitely postponed as well. Any questions on that? Okay, Article 4 proposes to add a human resources director. Mr. Walder, a brief explanation on this.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Moderator. You know, one of the glowing results that have come out of the financial issues that faced Wellfleet in the last couple of years is that we've had basically recommendations from not only the auditors, but as well as DOR to hire a human resource a director's position. One of the things that you know has changed over the years. You know, if you look back in the 1980s, you know, the human resource position was always considered personnel administration. It consisted of enrolling employees in benefit plans, processing their paychecks, hiring, discipline employees. And, you know, basically it was just really an administrative function. But over the years, you know, communities have struggled with more complex responsibilities that have changed and has also expanded, mostly due to federal and state compliance issues that have changed in recent years. As such, many municipalities, including Wellfleet, has encountered difficulties in keeping up with the legal requirements of employment, the benefits, the labor laws, which can be difficult, particularly in the fast changing world of human resource. So building off of their recommendations, you know, one of the things that I was able to reflect was, you know, currently the human resource tasks are carried out by 3 departments in town. It's your administration, it's your accounting office, as well as your treasury department. And these departments are heavily taxed already. Your Treasury Department has struggled to meet the requirements set forth, and that is, you know, shown by the recent financial struggles that this town has had. It's just the inability to be able to put the focus necessary to do the job. And, you know, when you look at Wellfleet, we have over 100 seasonal employees. So that's 100 seasonal onboarding employees that take place every year between April and June. And it's a real struggle for the department. It bogs down the financial obligation that the town has, and it really has resulted in some of those financial problems that Wellfleet has had. So when you look at some of the key outputs that we're looking for here, not only is it the long-term planning of our department and our staff, but it's also building employee relations. It's making sure that we have effective training for our staff, that we have succession planning. We struggled with that in recent years, to deal with customer service levels, to understand, you know, what our roles are, what you know, our responsibilities are as public officials, as well as you know, talent retention as well as development. You know, we talk about housing a lot. That housing also, you know, affects the worker pool that we're able to pull from. So I think it's very important that we have a strong ability to be able to recruit talent, to retain talent, and keep them on board. I'm going to save things in terms of some of those compliance issues that at the federal and state level. I'll save that for town meeting, but if anyone has any questions on that, I can speak a little more to it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you being brief. Ms. Wilson, Helen.
Yes, I have a question. As some of us know, when we passed the ADU zoning bylaw article last year, and a long time ago when we passed the AADU, in both cases, they need somebody on staff to administer and monitor the, shall we say, functional performance of that program, which is very important. And right now, there is nobody who is legitimately really in charge of that. The bylaw says specifically that the town administrator will appoint such a person. And it was handed to the building inspector, who it's absolutely not in that job description, nor should it be, because that is one of the staff, one of the departments that this agent appointed by the TA has to monitor. Is it possible, given the many different kinds of tasks that this position would cover, that this could also be part of that job description? It's not overly time consuming, but it's very time sensitive and it has to happen. So has that been considered? Because right now the building commissioner, talked to the building commissioner about it. It should never have happened that way. It happened with our last interim TA.
So to answer that question, there is no consideration at this time to assume that position. That may change in the future. I will say that, the administration team here has appointed someone to take over that program away from the building department and actually keep it in with the administration. That those duties have been passed over to, basically the current water clerk, planning board secretary. So it's Karen Plantier. She does the job well. She's has several meetings, not only with the administration, but legal on how to carry out the task. And we have met that expectation this past September. So we feel we have that position filled. If in the future we feel that we're not getting the output we need, then we can make an adjustment. But at this time, that human resource director's position will primarily focus on the personnel relation end of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Thank you, Rich. Any other questions on Article 4? Just a reminder that this article proposes new hiring beyond what was appropriated in the town budget at our last annual town meeting. So this will be contingent on the passage of an override question. And the question is question number 1 on the ballot, which takes place, reminder, the special town election will be on September 20th. Elaine McElroy, do you have a question?
Yep, I just was wondering, I know that the 115,000 covers all the expenses of the position, but I was curious about what the hiring salary would be for the position. The base salary.
Do you know?
It was between 80,000 and 90,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about Article 4? Article 5 proposes, again, this is another one that was postponed from the town meeting last June. And I believe that this is another one that was intended to be funded by free cash. So that I think this one is going to be definitely postponed as well. Is that correct, Rich?
That is correct.
Okay. Article 6 is the acquisition of the campground property, and we'll just maybe discuss this very briefly if there are any questions. But for those of you who may have come in late, Dick Elkin pointed out that there will be a longer presentation on this article and probably the two following ones after we go through the rest of the warrant and kind of wrap up the pre-town meeting. So if there are questions, I'd ask that maybe you can hold them till then. But just very briefly, this article does propose to ratify, if you will, the purchase and sales agreement that the select board signed with Maurice's Campground. It's subject to a Prop 2.5 debt exclusion, which is question 2 on the ballot. Let me just double check that is, yes, it's a debt exclusion, not an override. And because it's proposing both borrowing and acquisition of property, potentially by eminent domain, it will require a 2/3 vote. Rich or any of the select board, would you like to make a brief comment on this? But again, I think there'd be an opportunity for a more extended discussion both later on and at town meeting. Rich?
I would probably add, please stay tuned for the presentation. I think it has a lot of information that's important, might be able to answer a lot of questions that, the voters may have. It is a $6.5 million purchase of the Maurice Campground. It's a 21-acre parcel, relatively flat land. It's currently in operation as a campground. Part of the stipulation that currently exists is that the town would operate it for 6 years as a campground pending some approvals, whether it be through the Board of Health or DEP. It would require some approvals, but the intent of this article is to take ownership of that parcel.
Okay, again, we will have a more extended discussion on this. Yes, Mr. Simon? You need to unmute again, please.
My only question is that this is restricted to the financing of just the purchase of the land, right? There's going to be other costs associated with the town once it actually takes ownership of the property. Is that budget going to be discussed later?
Rich?
The intent of this article, the $6.5 million, is for the purpose of purchasing the property. There will be other future costs associated with development, planning, things like that. We'll get into that a little bit. I believe the presentation gets into that
Okay.
a little further discussion. But in about 2 articles from now, you'll get a little preview
Okay.
of what that looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Okay, again, if there are no other kind of quick questions on this, we'll move on and we'll come back to this at the end of the pre-town meeting. Article 7 is associated with this. The Community Preservation Committee is intending to offset some of the costs of the purchase by proposing a deed restriction, if you will. I hope I'm describing that correctly, for a portion of the property in return for which the CPC is going to use some of its funding, which the CPC funding is intended to support housing initiatives. So this falls within the mission of the Community Preservation Act. Again, I think there'll be a fuller discussion of this when we get to discussing Maurice's campground. But I think, have I summarized that relatively accurately, Rich?
Yes. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Again, if there are no questions on this, we'll move on. And then Article 8 proposes to authorize funding to operate the campground initially for the first year, assuming that the town takes ownership of it. The assumption is that the funding that the town has to come up with the funding ahead of time to make sure that the operational costs are covered, but that some of that will be recouped by the fees that are charged to those who use the campground for short-term or longer-term stays. Again, I think this will be explained a little more fully. But once again, because this is beyond what was authorized under our town budget at the annual town meeting, this will also be subject to a Prop 2.5 override vote. And that will be question 3 on the election the following week. Questions on that, or again, we can come back to this in more detail at the end of the pre-town meeting. Right, questions, both questions 9 and questions 10 are to renumber the 2 town codes, the general bylaws and the zoning bylaws. The town has contracted with an outside firm to redo, essentially restructure and renumber both the general bylaws and the zoning bylaws, and try to make it a little more coherent and consistent in its numbering. I don't know if Jennifer Conjal, our town clerk, wants to make any comment on this.
No, she had a long day yesterday.
Okay, that's
So,
true.
Glad she actually took the time off. I will say that this is a project that's been in the making since about 2016, 2017. It was actually part of the town clerk's budget, was to be pretty much renumber, restructure both the general bylaws and the zoning bylaws. One thing I just want to note is, there's no structural changes here. It's just making it easier to read, a little more consistent with today's standards. I believe that there might be some minor errors that might be corrected, spelling errors, but that there's no specific changes within the structure of both general bylaw, zoning bylaw. And also a draft of this can be seen at the town clerk's webpage. Go there, you can click the link and it'll show you the structural changes. It looks fantastic, a lot easier to read. And I think the town will really enjoy the product.
Yes, Helen, do you have a question? Comment?
You need to unmute yourself.
Very briefly, it's not a frill. What was discovered before 2016, it was pretty okay, but if antiquated. But at a certain point, naming no names, a couple of administrations ago, it was actually misnumbered and the titles were taken away from the table of contents. So it became almost very difficult, even for like me, to find where one of the general bylaws was. The zoning bylaws weren't quite such a mess, but in fact, it led to some errors in motions and so forth, because it was, the sections were misnumbered. So this is very good, and it's not a frill, and it did cost money, but it's worth it. It's not cosmetic. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions on this? Just a note that, and I did double check this with town council, that on Article 9, because it's a general bylaw and general bylaws only require a majority vote, the renumbering will only require a majority vote. Article 10, even though all we're doing really is renumbering them and making some spelling changes, because it is a zoning bylaw, that will in fact require a 2/3 vote. And I guess anything associated with zoning does require a 2/3 vote. So I was kind of hoping that maybe not, but town council said no, we do need a 2/3 vote on that one as well. Article 11, I'm sorry, any other questions on Articles 10 and 11? If not, Article 11 proposes to lease a portion of town property. This would be near the 1176 Grosse Hill Road is actually the address of Newcomb Hollow. And I think this was in response to some poor cell coverage out there. The town is hoping to find a carrier to put up a pole and provide some better cell coverage. I know the initial interest in this was from a firm that apparently is no longer interested, but I believe that the town wants to go ahead with this anyway. Am I correct on that, Rich?
That's true. We find this location have real value, and through an RFP process, we might be able to get a vendor that would like to put their antenna on the site.
All right, so this is again, hopefully the town will put out a request for proposals and we'll get a cell phone, a cell provider who might give us better coverage at the beach, for both for sort of general use of people, but more specifically for emergency purposes. Because this is proposing a longer term lease, it will also require a 2/3 vote by town meeting. Questions on that? Dick, did you have a question? Or no?
Yeah, how high will the tower be?
I don't think that has been identified yet. I know in the past that this was looked at by AT&T, a particular vendor. For some reason, I'm under the impression that there was an existing pole that they were looking to, put their antenna on. So if you just imagine a telephone pole with an antenna, that's how high.
A cell phone towers are usually 110 feet. Is that what we're talking about?
Again, through the RFP process, probably look at proposals on what they're proposing. I think, through the public process, if someone came back with a proposal for a 110-foot structure, it's going to go through the regulatory process to kind of vet that option out. I think the understanding initially was that there was cell potential on the top of a telephone pole that could be utilized at that location.
A telephone pole.
The telephone pole.
Which is only about 30 feet, okay.
And a lot of times those telephone poles are repeaters to larger antennas that are on higher sites. So they're not the main cell service carrying, but they're actually a repeater for cell service.
So we don't know if we're talking about a 30-foot pole that already exists or a 110-foot pole?
At this point, no. I think that the goal is to make this available for an RFP process. We'll go through that. If we get any vendors that are interested, then we'll look at the proposal and then make judgment based on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Dick. Any other questions on this proposal? All right, Article 12 is to accept a portion of state law which allows the town to keep unclaimed property. Right now, my understanding is that these are things like the town writes a check to someone for something that if the person doesn't cash the check or the vendor doesn't cash the check, that becomes unclaimed property. After a certain period of time, if the town hasn't adopted this statute, that money goes to the state. This would allow the town to keep keep unclaimed property, primarily financial instruments like that. Questions on this, Dick?
Yeah, paragraph C, the third line. I think that's a typo. I think it should be presumed to be abandoned rather than resumed to be abandoned.
I think you're probably correct. We can, Rich, you want to make a note of that? And we can check that with town council and we can correct that when we make the motion.
I have. Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Dick. Sharp eyes. That's very good. Any other questions on that? Let's hope that the error is in our it's not in the state statute, because this is the wording of a state statute. So I assume that was just a transpositional error. Thank you. All right, Article 13 is a bylaw amendment that would modify the plastic bottle ban that we put in effect a couple of meetings ago. Questions on this? Again, is the recycling committee, somebody from the recycling committee, are they going to make a longer presentation? Nancy or Christine?
Christine is here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, it doesn't need a lengthy presentation, so I could just say a couple of words about it right now.
Sure thing.
Our original 2020 article was for plastic water bottle ban, which was for containers less than 1 gallon. We're incrementally including additional types of beverage bottles. So this amendment would be to include non-alcoholic carbonated beverages in bottles less than 21 ounces. That is a New York City municipal bottle ban was passed in 2020 with those stipulations. We would like eventually to include all plastic bottles, but we're doing what we can in agreement with the select board to do an incremental approach. And there were some questions I just want to mention about whether aluminum cans really were a more sustainable option than plastic. And we will post a flyer we have with some information about that. And if anyone has any questions, you can just email wellfleetrecycles@gmail.com.
Thank you, Christine. Let me ask a question, since I don't get to ask them at town meeting. And I'm sure somebody will ask if I don't. Are other towns on the Cape similarly modifying their bans to mirror this, so that this will become Cape-wide following a number of town meetings?
We have not heard anything about any additional amendments. In fact, some towns have rescinded their water bottle ban that were passed in 2021. They rescinded them in 22. So there's obviously different feelings in different towns, but Wellfleet has always been at the forefront of these kinds of things, and we're hoping to set an example for reduced plastic use when there are alternatives available, which there are.
Thank you. Any other questions for Christine on this? Okay, Article 14 is a change in the charge for the Natural Resource Advisory Board. Is there someone from the NRAB would like to just speak to this briefly? I don't see hands up.
Yeah, I'm here and I can speak to it briefly. Hi, John Duane.
Oh, hello, John. Okay. sorry.
Yeah, I sit on the board. This isn't really I'm not spearheading this, but I know enough about it. It's basically to include, in our charter, there was no mention of ponds, for instance. So the charter has been rewritten. John Rio rewrote it with help from other folks. And so it's now including the ponds. And it's just a little bit more comprehensive look at what the Natural Resources Advisory Board is actually supposed to be doing.
All right. That's short and sweet. Thank you, John.
There you go.
Any other questions? Okay. Article 15 proposes a new general bylaw dealing with the feeding of wildlife. Anybody, I know Helen has an interest in this. Helen, would you like to make a brief presentation on this? Helen Wilson, go ahead. Helen, you've got to unmute.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
My interest in it is that the animal control officer, who I worked with previously on another general bylaw having to do with animal control generally, brought it to my attention and the attention of some other people that there were people who were egregiously feeding wild animals regularly, despite the fact that they'd been asked to stop. And looking into it more deeply with Officer Keogh, who no longer works for us, and coordinating with what the park has, which is always important here. This bylaw, or this group of sections, bylaw sections, was worked on by Officer Keogh, myself, and then tweaked by Janet Reinhardt, and also Ryan Curley. And there was quite a bit of research put into it, and it's a very nice, clean, simple thing, and you can still feed birds in your backyard. But it needs to happen, and the straw that broke the camel's back was the incident with the coyotes at Herring Cove in Provincetown, where a wild animal had to be euthanized because people had been feeding coyotes there. They should be scared of us, they should stay away from us, and we shouldn't interfere with their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Any other questions on this? All right. Article 16, 17, and 18 are a series of zoning bylaw amendments. And these will all require 2/3 votes. Would somebody like to speak to these briefly? Ryan, I think are you perhaps best?
Yeah. Sorry, which order do they go in? Okay, so the first one is Article 16, which is a zoning bylaw amendment that allows cottage colonies to be occupied on a year-round basis. This would still require, if it's in a condominium association, the agreement of the association to change their bylaw and or, upgrades to their septic system. But, and it doesn't allow for cottage colonies within the National Park Service District to be occupied on a year-round basis. I did check with the National Park Service. And they said that would be inconsistent with their founding legislation. And that's basically it for the article.
Okay. Dick, did you have a question?
Another one of those profound comments. In the Article A, it talks about a college, the NPS as follows. Everywhere else, it's NSP. So my question is that a typo?
Yeah, that's the typo. It should be NSP.
Okay.
I think we're going to appoint you as town proofreader, Dick.
I'm terrible at this, by the way.
I'm usually pretty good at finding those, but I didn't read this carefully. Ryan, just a question for you. The table that's listed in the warrant shows that's just referring to the cottage colony NS National Seashore Park. Is that a new table that does not exist in the current zoning bylaws?
It does, and we were, town council, the cottage colonies themselves are included in the zoning table already. Just the cottage colonies National Seashore Park, which is being created as part of this stuff, it was not, obviously, so that's being added to the use table.
Okay, thank you. So just, so people are clear on that. Any other questions or comments on this?
I do have a question, but I can't find the little hand.
Okay, this is Rhonda, somebody. or other?
Rhonda?
Hi, this is Rhonda Fowler. Quick question, please. On the cottage, on the condominiums, the cottage colonies that are already condominiums, they primarily share one septic system for however many there are, which is accommodated for seasonal use. If it would go to annual use, wouldn't we need to think about that ahead of time?
That's gonna be a question for the associations. We can only change the zoning bylaws, which enables the possibility, but it's up to the associations and the homeowners of those associations about whether or not, they would choose to allow year-round usage of their properties. I'll just leave it at that, so.
But I mean, Ryan, as concerns water runoff, since most of them are either near marshes or on waterfront or near waterfront, that potentially, each one has 2 or 3 bedrooms, and it could be upwards of, 21 bedrooms on one septic system being used all year instead of seasonally. Isn't that something we should think about ahead of time?
So a lot of those systems are going to have to be upgraded in the near future already. In terms of the change in how the properties are utilized, in the summer, we frequently see, if it's a 2-bedroom house, you'll have 8 people in there. Or a 2-bedroom cottage. And there's a difference between that type of use in the summer, as opposed to, having, 2 to 3 to maybe 4 people max in a 2-bedroom and for year round. Currently, cottage colonies are allowed to be occupied from,
November to April.
so it's just 4 months where they're currently not allowed to be occupied.
Okay,
So does that,
Rhonda,
sorry,
if you have another question and can keep it relatively brief, I don't want to get too much into a back and forth debate here. if
that's okay.
Possible.
Leave
Save
it.
that for town meeting.
Yep. leave
Go
it.
ahead.
Am I okay?
Yes, Helen.
Yeah, I want to address this and the other housing articles. It should be understood. Nothing can happen unless the septic system is exactly what it should be. And in fact, if you have year-round use that isn't 16 people all of a sudden for 2 months, off and on, septic systems work better. But one of the things I like about these different options for a few housing units here and there, we need everything we can, is that you can't do it. You can't change it to that unless the septic system is A-OK with not only the health department, health conservation agent, but also the Board of Health if variances are needed and so forth. And it may even increase, it may improve things because these septic systems would have to be upgraded. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Other questions or comments on this? Okay. Let me look at the other screen, make sure nobody's waving their hands. No. Okay, Article 17 is another zoning amendment. Brian, once again, if you would.
Yep, so Article 17 is affordable dwelling development. They are actually a type of subdivision and is not necessarily having to do with the structure of that's allowed on a. It's basically a subdivision with slightly different provisions than normal. So as part of this, we moved the definitions for the affordable dwelling development, affordable dwelling, and the special permit granting authority into the definitions of the Wellfleet zoning bylaws that they're currently, this bylaw is the only one that has its own definitions. And the special permit granting authority was previously, it's mentioned in a different bylaw, but it's currently not defined. And then inserting a use table for the affordable dwelling development and the affordable dwellings. Affordable dwelling is just any type of dwelling that has a deed restriction attached to it that makes it affordable. You know, so if somebody has a single family home in the National Seashore Park District and, you know, wants to have an affordable dwelling or affordability deed restriction on it, you know, they're able to do that. It does not allow for structures to be built where they currently are not allowed by changing that provision. And the remainder of the changes, which is almost the entirety of the text, is town council updating the pre-existing bylaw, which this is associated with, to current standards.
Thank you, Ryan. And just one note, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the use table that's printed in the warrant, I believe when the motion is made, there's going to be one change in that, that under the National Seashore Park line, where it currently says A, I believe that'll be changed to an O. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, if you could explain briefly.
So the National Seashore Park requires if there's a new subdivision, and it's not a lot that's basically grandfathered in, it requires a 3-acre minimum size. So, you know, there's probably only a few parcels that could be subdivided in the seashore anyways at that point. But this bylaw contains various lot sizes. And the best way to resolve the contradiction is to just make it prohibited use within the Seashore Park District.
Right. My understanding is that it was an oversight to have put the A in there without being cognizant of the lot size restriction within the park. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Jan Marcy.
Hi, Dan. Just before I start, I just want to note that I'm not representing any board or committee tonight. I'm just here speaking for myself. So I have a number of concerns about Article 17, and not about what its intent is, but what I see as possibly drafting issues within the amendments. And I wrote a memo to the select board. I didn't get it out till this weekend, so I don't expect that they've had time to really investigate all my concerns, but some of my concerns I think really need to be answered by town council. So I was just wondering if anybody from the select board has any comment to make tonight and can assure me that my answers to my questions would certainly be there by town meeting.
That's a question for the town administrator.
Rich?
Yeah, so what I can say is that we will have town council there at town meeting. I will say town council had attended the public hearing with the planning board, where I believe some of the concerns, and again, I haven't gone through fully your concerns, but have been addressed through the planning board process, and we'll be able to answer some questions at town meeting.
Okay, Jan, is that, again, without having either the memo or town council available tonight, I'm not sure it'd be productive to try to go through that, so.
No, I'm not going to do that. I just wanted to get some sort of response.
Yeah, town council will certainly be at town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Any other questions or comments on Article 17? Once again, this will require a 2/3 vote as a zoning bylaw change. And Article 18, again, another zoning change, Ryan, if you would.
Yep. So Article 18 is the affordable housing lots. This allows for lots that are considered undersized under the current Wellfleet zoning bylaws that are undersized and essentially unbuildable to be built on in certain circumstances with an affordable dwelling or affordable single family home. These are there's affordable lots, which is 10,000 square feet of contiguous upland area or larger. We have various zoning districts that have various minimum lot sizes. They range from 400 or 40,000 in R2. And I don't remember what the one in the central district is off the top of my head tonight. And then the affordable undersized lots, which are lots under 10,000 square feet. So 10,000 square feet is the minimum lot size that's allowed under Title V. The undersized lots really would only become, or what we're terming affordable undersized lots would only really become buildable if there's a shared septic system or a sewer system servicing the area. And then it adds a definition for contiguous upland, which previously wasn't defined. The use tables, and then it provides additional zoning relief in terms of setbacks, and as well as provisions for what happens when setbacks are under a certain threshold, which would be including a stockade fence to screen the surrounding properties. And these are for the affordable lots, they would be buildable by right. And the affordable undersized lots are by special permit. And they can only be built on once a deed restriction has been applied to them.
Thank you, Ryan. Questions on Article 18? Again, these are relatively complex proposals, so I expect that the debate at town meeting is going to be fairly substantial on these articles, and I'm going to ask that people be patient as the questions are asked and answered during town meeting. I think it's important that people understand exactly what's being proposed under these, so that they can make an educated vote on them. All right, no questions on that. Article 19 is a non-binding advisory.
Okay, never mind.
I'm sorry. Yes, Karen Kaminsky. I'm sorry.
Yes, actually, it's her husband, Richard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi. My question is there a list of these undersized or under 10,000 square foot lots that are available in the town? Just kind of curious as to, and also your other comment was the only way that they could be developed, if I did hear this correctly, is if there is a shared septic system?
So that's for the lots under 10,000 square feet. For the lots over 10,000, that you can put a Title V system or on the property. So the lots under 10,000 would require either a shared septic system or a sewer servicing the property.
Right. So, but again, is there a list of lots, locations, street addresses that would be applicable under this new bylaw? Because I think that would be important before anybody could vote on this.
Ryan, is there a list? Or do we have an accounting of them? How many?
Yeah, there's basically 18 parcels that have a high probability and 26 additional parcels where it's a possibility, depending on setbacks. I think a couple of those have dropped off the list since I don't have a publicly available list of the lots that this would apply to. at this time.
And one be made available. That's all, and attached to the website.
Yeah, Ryan, I might, again, I use this meeting as an opportunity to give the select board a heads up to the kind of questions that might be asked. If the select board or the assessors can make that information available, I think that might answer some questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaminsky. Any other questions on this? Okay. Article 19 is a non-binding advisory question to the select board, which would make a permanent, the recommendation would be that LeCount Hollow be permanently made a resident and taxpayers only town beach during the sticker season. Questions or comments on that?
Let's see, is Suzanne or Mike on? I don't see them. Okay, since 2020, LeCount Hollow has been a resident and taxpayer only beach. Every year the select boards voted to reauthorize that practice, but hasn't amended the overall beach rules and regulations. This is on here also at the request of the Community Services Director, who wanted to hear from the townspeople before we would make a permanent change to make LeCount Hollow a resident and taxpayer only beach permanently, or for however long the regulations apply for.
Yeah, I don't see Suzanne on the list, or I might be missing her. But Mike DeVasto, was he on? Did he want to say something?
I don't see him.
No, I see Michael's iPhone, but that might be a different Michael. All right. Any other questions on this one? All right, and the standard closing article. I don't believe I have any appointments to deal with at this town meeting, but not that I'm aware of. Again, once again, a reminder that the special town election takes place on Tuesday. Voting hours for the town elections are not as generous as they are for the state election, which we just had. The hours are from 12 to 7. Not from, and I don't think it, unfortunately, I don't think it actually says that on the warrant. Just taking a look.
It actually does.
Yes, it does. I'm sorry. In the warrant itself, it does say it. It doesn't say it on the title page, but yeah, it's 12 noon to 7. So be aware of that. That you don't have quite as long to vote as you do on a state election. So that'll be on Tuesday, September 20th. All right, with that, if there's no other questions on the articles that we've gone through, I'm going to sort of wrap up this part of the pre-town meeting. Again, thank the forum for sponsoring this, and thank you for your interest. Turn it over now to those people who would like to talk about Maurice's campground. Rich, do you want to start this off, or is
I think Sharon will
Yes.
take over, and let me bring up the presentation.
Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll wait for the presentation.
Sorry.
No worries.
Up.
I'll just start talking.
Go right ahead.
It's
Uh,
there.
You don't see my screen, is that it?
Oh, yeah, there it is. That was it. I saw you.
It was it, okay.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so my name is Sharon Ruhlager, and I'm a member of the Maurice's Campground Working Group. I'm going to be presenting the Select Board's proposal to purchase Maurice's Campground for the purpose of building affordable housing. This presentation will be a quick summary of the plan and work done over the summer to investigate the feasibility of this plan. After the slideshow, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. Present here this evening are other members of the working group who will answer questions pertaining to the issues they investigated. In addition, you'll find a great deal of regularly updated information at wellfleethousing.org, the joint website of Wellfleet's 3 housing committees. So this presentation will not be going into great depth, but you can get questions answered and you can go to the website and there is quite a lot of information there. And then after the slideshow, then you can ask questions and people will answer them as best they can. And then we will address Article 7 and 8 separately. Okay, so next slide, please. So I invite you to consider your vision of Wellfleet into the future. Whatever your vision is, also consider what action needs to be taken to make it happen. There's the cost of doing nothing. The vision of this working group is a vibrant, inclusive Wellfleet community for all of us into the future. This will require stable year-round and summer worker housing for individuals and families of all ages and income levels. Next slide, please. Wellfleet is losing young people and families. Seasonal home ownership is drastically increasing. There's almost no year-round rentals, and the cost of poor home ownership has skyrocketed. You can see the figures on the screen there. Next slide, please. So why Maurice's? Developable land is necessary to create more housing. Wellfleet's housing committees have been scouring lists of town and privately owned land above 3 acres for years. Very, very little land is available, and what there is challenged with many problems. Steep hills, no access, unclear title. They're in the Seashore Park. Maurice's offers a rare combination of 21 plus acres of level, already disturbed land. It's on Route 6 and the bike trail. It's close to Eastham with a possible tie-in to Eastham Town Water. The area around Maurice's has been identified by Grow Smart Cape Cod as one of very few areas in Wellfleet that would be appropriate for moderate density housing. Next slide. Since April, Maurice's Campground Working Group has been meeting and consists of members representing a broad swath of Wellfleet and an even broader range of knowledge and skills. A list of members and their roles will be on the screen at the end of the slideshow. In addition to those listed are numerous others who provided guidance and expertise on an as-needed basis. Subcommittees include campground financial review and operations, due diligence of grounds and buildings, septic, financing the purchase, and communications. Next slide, please. A purchase and sale agreement was signed with the sellers in April of 2022. The purchase price is $6.5 million. Should voters approve, the closing is scheduled for October 31st. Under the terms of the purchase and sale agreement, the town has agreed to continue campground operations for 6 years, allowing the many seasonal workers, summer winter shifters, and longtime vacationers to find other housing. This time is planned to be used by the town to engage in community-based comprehensive planning for the proposed housing. Earnings from the campground would also contribute to debt service. The Financing the Purchase Committee proposes a 30-year bond to pay for the campground. Community Preservation Act funds, income from the campground, and the Mixed Income Stabilization Fund will contribute to debt payment. Assuming all of those things, a 30-year bond at 4.5% interest, the average annual tax increase to a median cost home with year-round residential tax exemption would be $54.79. Next slide, please. The Campground Finances and Operations Committee has determined that the campground is operating at a healthy profit margin. Using a weighted matrix, they have determined that leasing the campground to a campground operator, is the most feasible way to continue operations. The Due Diligence Committee has thoroughly inspected the campground and property at large. They have found generally sound conditions and have projected costs of required upgrades and maintenance for 6 years. Additional site assessments were made by Bowler Engineering and environmental partners. The Both of these committees and outside reports can be found on wellfleethousing.org, as well as the information from the Financing the Purchase Committee and the campground operations. So that brings us to the next slide, which is the septic considerations. And then it's kind of the sticky wicket. Maurice's is a public source water supply and has test results dating back to 1993. Although there are cesspools on the site, there's no indication of contamination or that the cesspools pose any public health hazard. We've recently been informed that properties of this scale with this amount of flow are under the jurisdiction of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and not our Board of Health. And that the DEP, Mass DEP is a regulatory authority on decisions about septic issues. They are unable to make these decisions until the property is owned by the town after closing. The Select Board has drafted a septic upgrade plan for the property, which it is hoped will be of help in moving the process forward with the DEP. We do not know as yet what effect this will have, if any, on the purchase and sale agreement. The town will continue to work with the complexities involved and to develop a plan that best suits the needs of the community and the environment. Should voters approve the purchase, the next step will be a robust community engagement process to determine the quantity and types of housing that will best serve all members of the community. This process will include engineering to determine the design and to determine and design a state-of-the-art wastewater system serving this and potentially surrounding properties. A request for proposals will be developed and sent out to bid. The goal is to be shovel-ready at the end of summer 2028. Next slide, please. It's clear that Wellfleet needs more housing. Developable land will be needed for this to happen. We think that Maurice's Campground presents an opportunity to support the vision of Wellfleet as a vibrant and inclusive community for all of us well into the future. Next slide, please. And here you have a list of all of the different people that have been working on it. This has been a complex undertaking during the busiest part of the year. And this committee has come together under the leadership of Ryan Curley to work as a team and collect an impressive amount of information about this proposal. The members of each committee are present tonight to answer your questions as best they can. Thank you.
Okay. So again, raise your hand or wave frantically or interrupt us if you have a question. Oops, I just saw somebody. Okay, Toby, could you unmute yourself and ask your question?
This is her better half, Peter.
Oh,
Peter Simon. So the only real uncertainty in terms of this rather long-term plan is the solution that the state will oversee in terms of how water and sewage are handled. Is that right?
I'm going to let Ryan, and is Kurt Felix here? Well,
yeah,
Ryan,
I'm on as well.
Oh.
I'll just quickly answer Toby. I think the main challenge is figuring out what the town wants to do with regard to public housing, to a new housing complex. That's going to drive water and wastewater issues. In terms of the wastewater, the Board of Selectmen's plan is to install a state-of-the-art system which would reduce nitrogen levels by about 90 to 95% compared with the current levels that are being generated as the facility is run as a campground. With regard, and I'm pretty confident that DEP is very likely to look at the work that's been done. We had a very extensive consulting analysis that was done at 95 Lawrence Road, and that reviewed a number of systems that are currently on the market. And we're looking at about the same kind of septic flows, and that system is most likely the system that would be installed here. But at the end of the day, it's going to be state-of-the-art advanced technology, which would dramatically upgrade the current situation. With regard to water, the town of Eastham has generously offered to allow a connection to their public water supply. And I actually just had a conversation with the town administrator there, and she's indicated that they can probably do that at a very cost-effective, in a very cost-effective way for the developer. Either way, the developer is going to be paying for water. The developer would be paying for the septic upgrades. So DEP is going to drive the bus in terms of ultimately what they want to see happen with that situation, specifically with regard to the septic situation. Again, it's an unknown. There is some, I think, some risk there. But I think the one thing that's clear is that after running the campground for 20 years and after pumping the cesspools on that location at the end of each season, we haven't seen any decline or any measurable impact on the water quality in the area. So the idea that continued operation would be risky or have some unforeseen challenge, I don't think that's the case. So clearly there's a risk with regard to what DEP ultimately decides to do. My impression is that the risk is relatively low, and certainly that in the long run, this is going to lead to a dramatically upgraded septic and water situation. So the end result in over the next 4 to 6 years as we work through the process is going to be, I think, something the town will be very proud of, and ultimately significantly improve and upgrade the impact on water resources.
Okay, well, that sounds
Thank you,
like you've
Kurt.
got a certain amount of confidence that this is not only feasible, but cost-effective and a good way of generating more opportunities for housing.
For
Did I
sure.
paraphrase you correctly?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
the tax rate,
Ryan?
the tax rate in this town will benefit from increased numbers of people paying property taxes.
Brian?
Yeah, so this is Brian Stern. My wife and I, Karen, we went to the Butters meeting tonight. I think I know Ryan was there and a couple other people. I think the presentation that was given just now was very good, but what I had suggested was that we be a little bit more transparent with respect to all the things that we don't know. One of the things that came up was like water. And I'm hearing in this meeting tonight, and it didn't come up in the earlier meeting tonight, that water could come from Eastham. So there's a list of things that we really just don't understand at this point. And it was a very positive presentation, but it left me with more questions than answers. And again, my wife and I are very positive. We want to vote yes, but being in a butter and just there's some concerns. For example, you know, what's going to happen with the 3.5 or the 3.5 acres that you can move forward with now? There is no plan in place, as far as I understand, other than there's an opportunity to do something now. I think there could be a brainstorm exercise on the things that we don't understand. Again, that's just my perspective. Instead of saying this is a rosy situation, this is great for the community, we have to move forward. There are quite a few people in the campground who are not in favor of this. There are butters who are not in favor of this. And so I'm just trying to give the fuller perspective. And there's just a lot of information. For example, what's it going to cost besides the money for buying Maurice's campground? What's the cost going to be for the project? And since we don't know what the project is, we don't know the cost. And so again, there's just there's a list of things I think that we should demonstrate, or the transparency as much as we can. I hope my message is positive and clear. And again, I think it's a great presentation, but one I think that could be modified to incorporate more of the unknowns that are in front of us.
So
Thank you. Yeah, please, Brian.
So, you know, our work to date has been to try to do what needed to be done to get the article to the floor of town meeting. There's been a lot of outreach work that's been done. I'm sorry if there are certain people that feel, that we didn't reach. It's primarily volunteers that have been generating everything. In terms of the planning process for the parcel will happen after we have ownership of it. Usually that's pretty involved process in terms of, we would definitely be looking to have a lot of citizen input. One of the reasons to purchase this property is to provide the townspeople an opportunity for determine what they consider is the most appropriate use of that parcel and development of it.
So Ryan, I mean, that's a, without being rude, that's a perfect example. I think that something should be put into the presentation. I'm trying to be very positive in terms of what I'm saying, but that's a great example. The real work is going to start after the purchase is happening.
I
And,
said,
Yeah,
that
okay.
wasn't the presentation.
I mean, we've been saying that since we announced I'm not gonna, but the other issue that you raised is the 3-acre portion that is deed restricted for affordable housing. Because the DEP considers the entirety of the parcel as one facility in terms of septic, that parcel cannot be built on until we have a path forward with the DEP. So it will all be getting built on around the same time. I just want to make that clear as well.
Okay, Helen, do you have a
Yes.
question?
Yeah, well, I have something I'm going to call everybody's attention to, which I hope is not lost in the motions that will actually be made at town meeting, which are sometimes a bit different than what's in the warrant. In Article number 6, this purchase is proposed for the purpose of general municipal purposes, including without limitation for housing purposes and other uses, and or to lease all or portions of the property, further to raise appropriate blah, blah, blah. But that is a very, very good thing to have in here. And it's necessary. It underlines the fact that real decisions about what actually could be done with this parcel haven't been made yet. And why? Because the formal process, which is very normal, look at what happened with the Walsh property in Truro. After you make a purchase, even if it was like 2 acres, we'd be doing it. You get a group together and there's further information sharing and decision-making about what to ultimately do with it. That said, of course, housing is, in my mind, at the top of the list. But I also have to say that bringing this article to town meeting without certain things being pinned down, which these working groups have done, would have been a disaster and irresponsible. And the amount of work that went into it is excellent. We have a much better idea about this proposed purchase than we have in the past, in the deep past, about other purchases. It's essential before the voters take a look at it. And I recommend that you all do what Sharon Rule Agger, told you about, which is to go to the website, and there are more questions answered there and there's more data. I have one question now though. How much have you found out how much it costs to run the campground from the present owners for a year, never mind 6? Has that been pinned down? Can anybody answer that? Even ballpark?
Yes.
I
that-
can.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Just let me bring it up here on the computer here. Sorry, Helen.
Take your time.
I didn't have the document right in front of me.
I mean, are we going to have to pay, is this appropriation going to cover? Are we going to make our money back?
Yes.
Appropriation.
So we've done financial projections for the for 2 so if we lease the campground, we've done a projected income based on all of the expenses and profit and loss reports. If we were to lease it with the assumption that the lessee, the minimum bid is sorry, just looking at it here. $180,000, a minimum bid, that over 6 years, we would net $535,000 as a town after our expenses. And if we were to hire a management company to operate the town, it's a little bit more dicey. It could go in either direction a little bit more because we would be liable for the profit and whatever or loss that would happen. But that would net the town under our projections at around $637,000 over the 6-year period. Given the liability that we'd have under hiring a management company to run it on behalf of the town, through our weighted criteria, we determined that leasing it to an operator and collecting a check for the town was the most advantageous way to go, even though the net income was slightly less. And those are fairly conservative estimates. And that document is published as a draft right now, and that will be finalized and hopefully put on the website. I don't know if Sharon, do we have that on the website yet?
Yes, the
The financial ops
campground
report?
review and operations spreadsheet is on the website at this point. Yes.
Is the report on there too?
Let me see. I'm gonna just look right here.
Yes, the report's on the linked on that same spreadsheet.
Okay, so that's on the website as well. There's the ops report. So that sort of describes exactly the different options and what the actual projected capital costs, the annual profit and loss actuals from the previous years, and our projected income as a town. So we stand to basically net around $535,000 if we were to be leased and operated for 6 years after all our expenses that have been sort of laid out.
I have two comments on the last two questions, if you don't mind. The first one, why not tell at the town meeting that we would run it as a profit? That's a positive thing. Again, asking people to go to figure that out from the website, that's a confusing thing for me versus telling somebody that. And then the second point I wanted to make was, what I just heard was there's a potential that the site could be used for a Stop and Shop. Did I misinterpret what I just heard?
I don't know who said Stop and Shop.
It said multi-use. I just made that up.
Oh, yeah. So it's because there's a store on the property right now. Any projection? Am I unmuted? Any projected use? Any foreseeable use that the town may have? So if it were to operate the store, that should all be in the summary of what's being presented to the taxpayers. So the uses that we've laid out there, just like any potential uses that we are foreseeing, the town could also at any point determine during the planning process that it doesn't, want to have a store and cut and subdivide an acre off with the store on it and then sell that as well. So that's all part of the planning process that could go forward after this, but this is an opportunity to present, and then there'll be another presentation at town meeting. So I welcome any holes in the presentation that you see, and I'm sure Sharon would be thinking about incorporating anything that we're missing here. And as far as the operations and financial review, that was my purview. I released it as a draft, and I honestly just haven't had time to do the final edits and take the draft coffee off. I just wanted everyone to see it, so I got it out as quickly as I could.
Again,
Um,
my comments really are supposed to, from my perspective, get a positive response so that we get it to move forward and vote positively. And so from my perspective, the more information is better than, so again, I'm not asking for the specific numbers. It could just make a statement based on our initial review of the finances. We see a positive income coming in for the next 6 years. That's
It's
a
in-
very positive.
It's in the presentation.
Maybe I missed it again.
Okay, let me interrupt for a minute. We're reaching the end of our published time, but I see no reason to cut this off as long as people are interested. So don't feel under any time pressure until the committee says we're exhausted and it's 2 a.m. Other than that, we'll keep going with the questions. And if you want to drop off, I won't take it personally.
Could I speak to
Okay.
this issue? Hello,
Yeah, well, which issue?
the issues you're talking about. This is Richard Robichaux. I'm a member of the committee.
Yes,
And there are 44 campgrounds in Massachusetts that are members of the Massachusetts Campground Owners Association. And of those 44 members, Maurice's is one of them. They are among the least expensive campgrounds for people to rent spaces of all the 44. So the projections we made on income are based on the current income and the current fees that Maurice's charges. When we lease this to an operator, I'm sure he's going to increase some of those fees just to be competitive and also to bring it up to speed. They've been running this since 1949, and they have not increased the cost every single year. So they're among the, if you will, least expensive places to camp. That's all I have to say.
okay, thank you. Jim, you've
Okay.
been waiting patiently. Jim Hood,
Thanks, Richard. Am I up now?
yes.
Okay, so I just want to add very quickly, because I was listening to Kurt, and I just want to also support that. In terms of operating this site for the next 6 years, I reviewed the DEP reports for the water quality of the wells at this site. I've not found anything that would suggest that there's a problem there. And in my opinion, it's all good. And it's better than many wells that we have, private wells that we have in Wellfleet. So I'm just saying, I think this is a great site for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheila, you're next.
Thank you, Dick. I just wanted, I was following up on Brian, and I don't know Brian's last name, but I didn't catch it. But, you know, I think that what he was trying to say is something that I think a lot of people feel is that we do support this concept. We do support the effort. And I very much appreciate the work of the committee, because it does look like they've gone into a lot of different of this is what it could be. And that's right. I think it could be, but I think there's a lot of work to do before we start putting out that we are going to take it on and manage it. I mean, a town, we're not into businesses, so that's not what we do. So I think there's some opportunity here that we could not only look at Eastham for their water, but this is a big deal, and this is going to cost millions of dollars. That is the bottom line in the end, whether we get it from federal grants, whether we get it from here or there, and then there's going to be some on the taxpayer. This is a great opportunity, I think, to have a conversation with Eastham and see how you could really make this a regional, could be a sub-regional little jewel of a project that would give everybody credit, would share responsibility, would share costs, would share
lift in getting grants money, federal money. And I think there's some work to be done. I think the work that's been done is excellent. And I applaud everybody for, because I know it's hard and it's due diligence and you're getting in there with the unknowns, but there's a lot of people who can help. And I think there's ways of being able to get some experts in here to really look at the picture, to be able to, we don't have to be under this DEP. If we come out with a great project, I think there's some things we need to think about. And I also want to just say one thing about what Richard Robershaw just said. This is a campground and it was always a low. And so there's a part of me that feels a sort of sense of loss because there are, parks are where, at this point, where can a family go for a vacation on Cape Cod? So you're going to lose that too. So just keep all that in mind. And the other thing that I think we have to think about and really seriously study is, so we're bringing on new housing. Everybody wants to, we built out everything. We got hardly any room to build anything on Cape Cod, but now we got to fill the rest of it with housing. And yet we're in droughts. We have an aquifer, a single, there's a lot to think about here. And I think I would like to say that we have the intent, we have a good faith that we want to venture into this, but I think we have to be very careful about what we're signing up for, that we are in a precarious situation financially ourselves. We're just picking ourselves up. So what we're signing up for right away, can't we delay this? Let us get some work done to really see things and then sign this purchase and the agreement. But I think there are unknowns, and I'm echoing what the concern, and it doesn't want to be, nobody wants to be against it. Nobody wants to be downing. It's a great thing, but I think we have work to do. So that's all I'm going to say. And I know that you can go to the county. There's a lot of resources available to the town if they want to go and pluck those resources. Everyone's willing to help on this. So thank you, Dick.
Okay, Heather, you're next. Can you unmute yourself?
I did. So thanks all. So transparency, I was on the committee. I'm also a seasonal resident of Maurice's. I am here today. So I might just speak up in response to the gentleman, Brian, who is on. Brian, I did hear you say that people on the campground that don't support this acquisition. So I would submit to you that I've personally interviewed countless people here. I was part of the interrogation of seasonal workers and other people that are here to gather their thoughts. And the idea that we would keep some sort of control over our destination as opposed to a developer is actually quite important to those of us that are here. So I just want to unfortunately dilute a little bit of your comment about people in the campground not supporting the acquisition.
Thank you. Ryan, you're next.
Sure. So, we can't delay this purchase. We need to have control of the property for certain aspects of the planning process to play out. The last thing you want to do is expend significant amount of time and resources on a property that you do not control, and have a developer come in and completely change the game. This does give the town of Wellfleet and the citizens of Wellfleet the ability to control the destiny of this parcel in South Wellfleet. I'm sure we can take the example of some of the developments that are happening in Eastham right now, where they went in and they, leveled an entire very large lot, clear cut every single tree. And the starting price for those, which are condos, is around $650,000 for a studio, for a 1-bedroom studio. This is what we're dealing with. Maurice's, this property there's the only other large parcel besides it really in Wellfleet. That's the other ones are is the drive-in, which I'm sure we would all want to stay as what it is currently. Another one is the trailer park behind the drive-in, which, you know, again, that's year-round residences that, you know, would be displaced on any purchase of that property. Maurice's is really the best option we have, and going forward for, you know, basically to start addressing the housing issues. Yes, we have 95 Lawrence Road. That will be finished, the construction and the lottery for that will finish by the time we build anything on Maurice's. So it actually fits well into our timeline. The median sale price of a single family home in Wellfleet is over 800,000 now, and it's just getting to a point where nobody can afford anything. I see it on a daily basis, people just looking and looking and looking desperately. I've seen, you know, people that are living out of a car. I've seen people that are going to lose custody of their children because they don't have a place to live, and they can afford a place. They just can't afford, you know, a place here where there's nothing that's affordable.
You know, if I can just say something, I think everybody understands that, Ryan. So I appreciate, and we're not saying that we don't see that. We want to make this work. I think there was other ways of doing it. So I'm going to hand it back over to Dick.
Okay, Mike DeVasto, you're next.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to point out that like the planning process for the use of the property really can't go on until after we own the property. We were very fortunate during the negotiations to be able to push this off into a special town meeting in the fall. It was approximately a year of negotiating and a back and forth. We wanted to have the time to do the due diligence that we have been able to do on the property to get it to town meeting with enough information for people to make a vote. But essentially what we're buying is this 21-acre parcel to develop. And I think, the owners of the property, they want to sell. So this is our opportunity here now. There's always going to be a desire to have more information and more information. But with land acquisitions, sometimes it's just the right place and the right time. And, there's been instances in this town in the recent past where we have done a lot of talking and due diligence about what we were going to do with the property and brought it to town meeting without having a purchase and sale agreement signed, and had that property been bought out from under us. That's not a situation that, you want to be in. So as much as a process of purchasing land as a municipal government is imperfect, I feel confident that we have done this in an appropriate way and really have done the homework on the property and the potential use for the property. And this planning process that will go forward, yes, there'll be some money expended in the planning, but if you look at Lawrence Road, I think it's a $27 million project, something along those lines. And the developer is bearing the cost of developing that. I think the town, they're asking the town for $500,000 contribution. So $500,000 on I don't know the figure 100%, but I believe 27 million. And so those are the types of things that happen under 40B development. There's other things we can do on the property. That site is 5.5 acres. We're talking about 21 acres. There's a lot of potential, but we're not going to know all that. And this could have been a much more compressed timeline where we signed a purchase and sale agreement and put it straight on to a warrant without all the questions answered that we've gotten answered. And, there's still going to be questions. I mean, there's There's no doubt about that, but I'm very comfortable and confident that we've done as good a job as possible in due diligence for a purchase of the size. Now, operating a campground is another aspect of this, and it shouldn't be swept under the table. But the potential exists for us to lease that out, and in a lease situation, the town would be indemnified, and the town from liability, and the town would be basically collecting rent from the lessee. So we wouldn't be actually operating physically in a material way the operations of the campground in that scenario. But there's going to be some what ifs, and there's going to be some matter of things may not go exactly as planned, but this is a really, really great opportunity. I really want to thank all the people who put the effort into doing the work on the subcommittees, because it's just a tremendous amount of work.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, you had
Yeah.
something you wanted to say?
Yes, I just wanted to, it's right, Michael said part of it, but the question has come up a number of times and we've answered it in our FAQs on the website, but people still want to know, well, how much is this going to cost the town? Okay, so we buy the land, and then how much is it going to cost us to build the buildings? And in developments of this sort, typically the town's contribution is the land. And the developer raises funds from affordable housing tax credits and other sources. And also, as far as the septic kinds of things, there's quite often infrastructure grants that we take advantage of. So as Michael said, hopefully this will not cost the town very much, especially considering the enormous benefit the town will receive from it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Peter Landon, you're next.
Yes, sir. I have a question on the options of sites available. And I had read the Cape Cod Times 2017 article on the Marconi site that the town owned 44 acres. It was considering using for affordable housing. And it was landlocked, but that other towns had swapped out and could get another a suitable site in exchange at the seashore. And what was attractive at the time was the cost factor. We own it. If the validity of that article is true, could you comment on, is this an option?
I can comment on that.
Please,
It's slightly
Mike.
unrelated to the question, but I mean, to the actual warrant article. But that the land that is landlocked with the National Seashore is land that actually has no legal right of way. So its value is diminished by that. And land swaps with the National Seashore are pretty difficult. So there's been ongoing discussion with the seashore about the area known as the landing strip and land swaps. That's still ongoing. I wouldn't say that it's likely to result in a situation where the town would receive a like kind amount of land that could be used for housing. I don't see that as a possibility going forward, given the discussions that we've had with the seashore over other land swaps, which simply involve trading marshland for marshland, and those can be difficult in themselves, and it's really not a controversial land swap. So dealing with the park is not something where we can just sort of make a proposal and they're going to accept it and go forward. There's a huge amount of bureaucratic hurdles that are involved with that. And I would say it's highly unlikely that we would be able to swap that out for like kind property for the use of housing within the National Seashore District.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
you had your
understand.
hand raised, Mike. Did you have another? question?
No, I
you
was
want to-
just raised my hand to respond to that.
I
Oh,
did
okay.
too. Can I have a follow-up on that? I understand the difficulty. I saw in California to lessen the difficulty of swaps that the state has approved legislation to allow and asking for an inventory of all public lands owned by the federal government, the seashores, special authorities, with the intent that affordable housing have a priority on the reuse of public lands because of the similar difficulty of finding a site that we're finding. And that legislation is approved. I thought they'd find that as a precedent. I think people like the seashore, are highly bureaucratic, and that we've lost our talking point with them when they sunset the committee where the town had an opportunity to communicate. So it would even be more difficult there, but California is leading the way. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, Ryan?
So if I may, National Seashore is a very different animal to deal with than the Bureau of Land Management or the Forestry Service. It is a national park. There's also specific founding legislation for the seashore, which also limits the ability to use land within the seashore, even if it is privately owned. So that's, it was on an earlier zoning article. The legislation provides for 3-acre minimum lot size for a single family residence. It does not allow for multifamily. So, any land that the seashore could possibly trade to us, we wouldn't really be able to do a whole lot of development on, because we'd be restricted to 3-acre single family homes, rather than, and the, yeah, I just wanted to add that. So thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
Michael,
there's-
you're next.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. There is a parcel that we own that's within the National Seashore District that is a town-owned parcel of land that we cannot develop for housing. We could do something else there for municipal purposes, but we cannot utilize it for any kind of public housing. And that is owned by the town, but within the Seashore District.
Okay, Brian?
Yes, can someone explain, so again, on the Lawrenceville project, you said the developer, sorry, what did I say?
Lawrence Road.
When the Lawrence Road project, the developer pays for, builds the properties. What I don't understand, and maybe I haven't done my homework, is how does that work? How do people qualify to buy those, to buy and or rent? Are those people buying those properties, renting those properties? How is someone qualified? 'Cause I assume the same rules would apply for the Maurice campground. How does that actually work?
Can I respond to this, Dick?
Please, go
Yeah,
right ahead.
so 40B is a certain type of housing development that's mixed income housing. There has to be income restrictions on the housing there. The income restrictions, Sharon would probably have those answers better than I do, but they're fairly high for, the average worker. So, and then they go down to very low income. So there's different types of housing in there. Because of that, because of those income restrictions, they apply for federal and state grant money that basically that allows them to develop that and then collect the rents. So the town basically has a hands-off situation. We give them a 99-year lease, they build all the buildings, they collect the rents, and they're restricted by the regulations of 40B development. We did also have another developer in that respond to that RFP that didn't use any 40B funding at all. And they were also willing to develop the land without any money from the town. They were actually going to pay the town as well as build that. That would have been higher income thresholds than the 40B allows for. but they were going to use private investment and loans, and actually had a business model to create that housing. So there's different models out there, but essentially when you issue the RFP, the request for proposals, that delineates what the town would like to see in a housing development. And then when the proposals come in, we use that RFP to match their proposal to what we asked for. And as long as they're within our requirements, we can grant that RFP to the one who most closely met our request. So the town has some say over how the land is developed as well, buffering, design elements, stuff like that under those circumstances. We don't have control over what proposals we get, and we have to abide by procurement law, mass procurement law. But it's a much better system than, say, a hostile 40B, which if you're not meeting the thresholds of affordable housing for the state, then the state will allow any developer to basically do a hostile 40B and develop affordable housing in any way they see fit that is allowable in the town. So
can I comment? First of all, that is just an outstanding answer. And it does align with the whole concept of Maurice's and why we want to do Maurice's. It's not clear. Again, I didn't understand that. It's not clear to me what percentage of Wellfleet community would understand that. But again, that kind of messaging of why we're trying to do it, I think would be very beneficial. Maybe again, and Sharon is going to include that in the discussion. But those are the kind of things that are going to get people to vote positively in the upcoming meeting. And in tonight's meeting, there was a woman who said, we want to move forward and we have to take it as an act of faith. And so I'm kind of aligned with that concept, but just giving that kind of answer you just gave in terms of how does affordable housing work, talking about the other projects that we already have in place, and that we really do know, even though there's a list of unknowns, we do really understand this is why we want to move forward. So I think that was a really great answer. Thank you.
thanks.
So let me say, to emphasize what Mike said, the town shapes the project by how they write the request for proposal, the RFP. And that is where all of our desires are put in about what target income levels we're shooting for and how much the things will be able to cost, because the developer needs to make a profit. But if we're requiring a certain percentage to be various levels of affordability, those are the guidelines they have to bid to. And then anything else in terms of renewable energy or anything else that the town wants to put in, that all goes into the RFP.
Yeah.
That's where the project gets shaped. That takes years to develop, a year or two, after we decide what we want.
And even then, people can submit proposals that don't meet our request for proposals, and we can consider them. And there's certain limitations on what we can ask for without a bid contest from the bidder. So there's a lot of technical procurement law that's involved with that.
Yeah, right. Okay, Sharon, are you raising your hand?
I am. And, I don't know, this might be a good way to end this conversation, but if people want to keep going, that's fine. But I do want to say that you don't get an RFP that reflects the will of the town without people being engaged in the comprehensive planning process. And so people have to be paying attention. We can advertise all we want, but if people aren't kind of going, oh, somewhere they're going to be asking you to come to some meetings and talk about what kind of housing and how much of it and all that kind of thing, what they want to have happen at Maurice's. If people don't come to those meetings, then their view is not going to be represented in the RFP. So I just hope people really can hear that and be present and be part of the process.
Okay. Does anyone have any other final words, or should we call it? Oh, Kurt. Yes, you want to
Yeah,
add
just
some-
one final comment. I think that was a great summary. But at the end of the day, that whole process doesn't start unless the town votes to purchase the property. So that's what this is all about. And just to remind everybody to please come, please vote, please be, involved and engaged. But this 2-3 year planning process can't even begin unless the town has voted to acquire the property. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, well, on behalf of the Wellfleet Forum, let me thank all the participants. It's been a lively discussion, and thank the town for the use of their Zoom account. And we'll see you all at town meeting, which is,
Thank you, Dick, and thank the forum.
okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, Dick.